Thank you. That was amazing. So I'm going to stand because that's how I envisioned it last time when there were other people. And part of it is I don't have any slides. I have me. And I am a somatic educator. And so part of the communication is being able to just be a little bit embodied. And to communicate with you, all of you, and some of the people who I know in this room, thank you for showing. And it's really a pleasure to have the opportunity to share in regards to who is at the table. Because the table that we're all creating together is one that's so essential for humanity. And what I'm bringing to the table here is really talking about human nature and the deep undercurrent of how do we socially, collectively create a system of healing. And I'm going to give you a little bit about myself, where I come from, and then my evolution, and then talking about what I see as the larger arc of Culture for Care, which is component of everything that I'm hearing, because we are each part of that mycelia, that growing undercurrent of co-creation. So where I come from is a background that when you had the last session, a lot of it was on psychedelics. So many of us have psychedelic background. Raise hands. Yes. So in that psychedelic background, how do we actually integrate that psychedelic consciousness? So part of that integration process led me to something called reevaluational co-counseling. Anybody heard of that? Some of us know that dealing with our deep emotional undercurrents is what helped bring us home from trauma. And a lot of what happens when we awaken in ourselves is our society represses who we are. So we're creating a different kind of social system that allows for the integration of our totality to come forward. And in that integration of totality, over the past 20 years, I've been doing something called somatic embodiment education, which takes the information from the inside out of self, healing trauma, not only my own, not only those I work with, but systemic issues that undermine our capacity to move forward in these essential ways. So somatic embodiment education allows for a different value system that is embedded, in my opinion. My opinion is that that value system needs to be embedded in each of these structures. That how do we actually integrate the healing and the understanding of what traumatizes us? And I feel that the key is to create systems that say, this is just where we're going to live now. And these old ones will fall away. But understanding what are those old ones? And that takes me to social architecture, community building, and understanding when you build a social architecture, what is a base note that you want? You want to be able to default into collaboration. You want to be able to default into social mechanisms that allow for communication, to circle, and to debug what I consider polarization and war. And please, people, and I think we all know this, and I think it's kind of from top down, bullying doesn't work, and that we need to not empower any bully. Wherever we see a bully, we take the power away from that bully. We invite the bully into another kind of social system, and if they don't do it, well, we just continue to marginalize that bully's power. And we recognize what kind of power system empowers a bully, and the ones that the three of you described don't. Would you agree? We would agree. So how do we actually socially empower a different system that is shifting away from the isms? Because I also find in our culture there's so much rising information around creating a world that is just. And we are creating that, each of us, in a way that allows us to co-create. So from social architecture to community building, going into the arc of culture for care. And Culture for Care is looking at all of the different models that are germinating in a consciousness of mycelia that we are each a part of. And one of the thought processes I had when I came here was, if every single vision in this room took shape at the level that we each know it could and would, we in this room would be the mycelia that would heal this planet. And it's just in this space. It is here. And so how does each of us create that kind of consciousness that allows us to relate in that form? In understanding the right relationship dynamic of human interaction and working with trauma, another question I have, anybody in this room has been affected by any of the natural disasters recently? Anybody know anybody in this room has been, yeah. And anybody expect in the future that we will probably, and so how do we actually engage that in the level that you speak to? And that's where the lily pad consciousness comes in, is that is where we will be able to transform our society. And how do we lift up that cultural awareness when these systems happen? So we are in a shifting point. And for me, in the somatic healing journey, is how do we empower a social conversation that allows for us to integrate the new value system that we are all a part of and empower it with each other and co-create. And then that then takes me to one more piece. And I'm curious about my time, because I didn't time myself on this. Michael? 5 more minutes. Oh, goody. So when we are in a relationship with hierarchy and power, how do we step out of it to understand one system from another? Because what we need, in my opinion, is to shift out of a dominant hierarchy that allows for the bully, which is the power structure, to shift into a collaborative social system. And how do we actually socially build that out into a collective dialogue that allows for the humanity that lives inside of each of us to grow through feedback? And these are questions that come when people engage over time. It's not something you can get to in one session. It's something that we need to be looking at in ourselves, because it's embedded in a history of repression. And as we're stepping into creating new social systems, how do we uncover that component, that thread, that aspect that has been allowed to be perpetuated by the way power is offered up today? And if we pull on those internal threads of understanding and then help each other to recognize that it's in each of us, and in some of us actually gain power from using a top-down system, and they don't actually want to stop. But we take that power away and empower others so that we can cultivate this new understanding of what we need to do. And this is, for me, I think that something Paul Stamets, anybody in the room know Paul? Yeah, Paul Stamets. Anybody know how passionate he is about mushrooms and his awareness of how that's like key and it will save the world? Well, I believe that if he were to hand me his beekeeping, so he has this, you put this here, bees fly into it, there's a mushroom component that helps deal with the mites that are killing the bee population. And the bee population, if it crashes, we're, aren't we? Yeah. So Paul is very passionate that this and mushrooms will save the world. And I'm passionate that each one of our passions will save the world. That it is important to unlock from the inside these understandings to support one another, because in our culture, when we start to rise, if we rise too high, the system sometimes doesn't actually support that rise. Has anybody ever experienced that? Yes, we have. So part of the understanding is how do we shift out of a system that undermines that power base, but actually unites and lifts us? And the voices and the words that we're all coming from is creating that, but we also need to learn and understand the deeper undercurrents of what is stopping the social frequency from moving to the next level that's embedded in our own reactivity around power. Because power is essential. My power is essential. Your power is essential. cultivating our power collectively is key. And when we allow our cultivation of that power to rise, we can change the world, and I know we will. Thank you very much.
Beautiful. Thank you, Surya.
Oh!
That's fantastic.